This tank has air in it right now. This is what you're going to be breathing when you're diving. But what we do is we take a chunk of air, anywhere from 10 cubic feet to 120 cubic feet, we push it inside of this tank so that you have some time underwater. The average adult male will breathe about 1 cubic feet of air per minute. So, but when we put this air in here, when we compress air, it heats up, so it makes this tank hot. So then, if you look at your pressure gauge from the tank, it shows you how much air you have in that tank. You'll have a pressure, let's say 3,000 pounds. But then, when you take it out, you go in the water where it will cool down, and you look at your pressure gauge, there's going to be less pressure. That's explained by a law in physics called Charles's law, which says that the pressure depends on the temperature. Simply, the higher the temperature, the higher the pressure. The lower the temperature, the lower the pressure. When we get all these air molecules inside of here, they're all straining, trying to get out. So that makes this actually into an explosive device, probably equivalent to half a stick of dynamite. Because of that, these things are regulated by the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, mainly because on interstate highways, bridges, and tunnels, these tanks have to be safe. They can't be blowing up. Now, normally they only blow up when we're filling them, but they can blow at any time, and they can cause a lot of damage. So, therefore, the Department of Transportation took jurisdiction over these tanks early in their existence. And we also follow the protocols that they have set up. For example, we will not fill a tank unless it's been hydrostatically tested every 5 years. So we look on here, when that test is done, the hydrostatic test, they actually expand the tank and then let the pressure off, and the tank's supposed to come back to its original volume plus or minus 10%. If it doesn't, they will not pass that tank. If the tank passes, then the month and year of that test is stamped on the tank. In this case, it's 3/10. March 2010 was what last time this test was done. So we'll fill this tank now until 2015. Now also, we will not fill a tank unless it has a visual inspection sticker on it, which says that sometime during the previous year, somebody has taken this valve off that tank, stuck a light down in here, and checked for any holes, pits, or cracks that may be inside of this tank. We also look at on the outside of the tank, especially underneath the boot. Make sure there's no pits or cracks in there, so when we're filling it, it will not blow up. This tank, normally when it's full, will have this valve cover on. And actually when it's being transported, it should have it on. But before you can do anything on hooking your equipment up, assembling your equipment, you should take this valve cover off. That way you can tell what is the front of the tank. The front of the tank is considered this part with that round O-ring right here. That's where the air comes out from this tank. That's the front of the tank. We also call that the eye of the tank because when we're wearing it, it's looking in the same direction we are looking. Or it's looking at the back of our head. That way, this is the front of the tank, this is the right side, this is the left side, this is the back side. Okay? The first thing that we do in assembling your equipment is number one, stand the tank up. Number two, take the valve cover off. Number three, we take our buoyancy compensator. Buoyancy compensator, or BC, sometimes it's called BC device, BCD. Buoyancy compensator goes on the tank, on the front of the tank. I'm going to turn it sideways. I like to work from behind it. That way right is right, left is left. I'm going to turn it sideways. Most BCs have a single band. There are some out that have double bands. What we do is place the buoyancy compensator over the top of the tank with the band around the tank. If it's a little bit tight, having trouble getting it down, just loosen up a little bit. Push it back through this arrangement, but don't take it out of here. When you take it out, it takes an engineer to put it back together again. So just loosen it up some. You put it on the tank so the hard part of the backpack is just about even with the neck of the tank. If this is too high up, the tank can slip out. If it's too low, then it may hit you in the back of the head. Sometimes you have to experiment and find the perfect place for your BC arrangement. Then what you do is pull the strap tight. Now these straps should be wet. You should soak them a little bit before you put them on here. Because this is one of our problems we have in diving, is not getting the strap secure enough, so then the tank happens to fall out while you're walking off the beach or jumping off the boat. Some buoyancy compensators have this little handle here that you can put over the valve of the tank, or you can use it for a handle. A lot of instructors like to have you put it over the valve of the tank, because if for some reason this does slide out, the whole tank will not drop out of your BC. It'll get hung up on this upper strap. So make this good and tight. In most BCs, this arrangement is about the same. What you do then, put the strap back through the upper part of the buckle. Then cam the buckle over, and it locks in place. Then check it. Make sure it's on there good and tight. Next thing you want to do is make sure the cummerbund are undone. See how it is right now? It's drawn together, so when you put it on, you won't find it. It's behind you. So what you should do is open it up. Open the cummerbund up, or the belt, whatever you want to call it. Loosen the shoulder straps up, so you don't have to struggle to get into it. All right. The BC is on. Now, what's the purpose of the buoyancy compensator? Well, we have three uses for the buoyancy compensator. One is for flotation. When we're on the surface, if we can get this blown up, we can float. The more lift you got, higher up out of water you'll float. Some BCs that they call travel BCs have very little lift. They were designed for traveling, so they aren't so bulky. The only disadvantage is you don't have much buoyancy. So when you're on the surface of the water, you are not floating that much out of the water. They're mainly good if you're just doing boat diving where you're going right back. But if you're going to spend a lot of time on the surface, you may think whether it is a good idea to get a low lift BC. Yeah. So, surface flotation. You get it blown up on the surface, you just lay back and float. You don't have to be up there struggling, treading water. You get it blown up, inflate it. It's your little life raft. Okay. We also use it for descending and ascending. When we want to go down, we just let the air out. Then gravity is going to take us down. If we want to go up, we put some air in it. We can go up to the surface. You don't have to use your legs at all. In diving, you can use your BC to go up and down. Okay. In fact, we certify some people didn't have the use of their legs, because they could get around with a BC, especially up and down. And on the bottom, somebody will help them get around. But they were able to do all the skills they needed to do without the use of their legs. The third reason we use this buoyancy compensator is what the name implies. It compensates your buoyancy. If you're too heavy, because one thing is, especially if you're wearing a wetsuit, that wetsuit has got nothing but gas bubbles in it. It's nitrogen bubbles usually. And remembering Boyle's law, if you go down to 33 feet, those bubbles are going to be half the size that they are on the surface. So on the surface, those bubbles are giving you buoyancy. It's lift. That's why we have to wear weight to overcome our wetsuit buoyancy. But when you descend, let's say to 33 feet, that suit's going to be half the thick, so you lost half your buoyancy. So down there, you're going to be heavier than you are on the surface. So then you may be down there pinned on the bottom. So So what you would do then is use the BC. You would put some air in it to get yourself neutrally buoyant again, what we call neutral buoyancy. You can get so good with it that you can hang right in mid-water, completely weightless, just like the astronauts in space. You inhale, you rise a little bit, you exhale, you sink a little bit. You don't have to move your arms or legs or anything. It's the greatest feeling in the world, just hanging there, completely weightless. Now, it takes a little time to get good at it. In the beginning, it may look like a yo-yo, go up and down, because a lot has to do with your breathing rhythm. So it takes a little bit of practice to get good at buoyancy control. But we'll practice it during the class, but sometimes it takes a few dives after you get certified to really get good at it. How do we put the air in the BC? This is your BC hose, this is our BC mouthpiece. One way of putting air in is orally, by mouth. Just take a breath there and blow it in there. We do that by putting this mouthpiece up to our mouth, making a tight seal, and just an instant before we push this button right here, the top button. It varies with different manufacturers, but it's easily found. But just an instant before you push that button, start blowing. You put it up, push the button and blow. Let up on that button. Take another breath through your mouth. Each time I'm doing that, I'm putting air in this BC. Now, why do you do it just an instant? Why do you start blowing just an instant before you push the button? Well, you could have water in this mouthpiece and some air in your BC. You put it up to your mouth, push the button, water's going to shoot in. But if you're blowing first, you keep the water in here. The other way of putting air in this buoyancy compensator is with this button. This is what we call our automatic inflator button. This works directly off our tank. Regulator first stage, but it's off our tank. We're delivering air from our tank into the BC instead of blowing it in. This is very convenient, easy, but it's also very dangerous. There is not a BC manufactured on the earth that when you push this button down doesn't sometimes stick. Plus people, if they aren't familiar with it, they push it too hard, put too much air in, and that will shoot you right up to the surface. Now I'll show you what it means when this button sticks in a minute. Once we get the BC on, what we want to do now is put our regulator on the system. The first stage that goes on the tank valve takes the tank pressure of 2,000 pounds and breaks it down into intermediate hose pressure of, let's say, 160 pounds. The second stage that goes in our mouth breaks the hose pressure down into ambient pressure, whatever we need, wherever we're at. Here at sea level is 14.7, 33 feet down is 29.4. The first stage, the first thing we do is unscrew this yoke screw. This keeps the cover in here that covers up a round metal seat and a screen. This cover is supposed to keep dust and everything out of here, but more important, it needs to keep water out. Because if water gets into that screen, then it starts corroding, and then it's going to be hard to breathe through this regulator. So we take that off first, and we notice there's a round metal seat right here. That round metal seat exactly matches this round O-ring. I say that because sometimes people want to try to put it on like this, with the yoke screw in where that round O-ring is. It won't work that way. You need a round metal seat against the round O-ring. The second stage, primary second stage, goes on the right side. So physically place it on the right. The alternate regulator, or octopus, also goes on the right, so physically place it on the right. Now, why do we have 2 second stages? Well, one reason is, well, if something happens to your primary, bite through the mouthpiece or something, you can always use the alternate. More importantly, it's for your dumb buddy that keeps running out of air. Okay, you would give your buddy this one and bring them both of you up to the surface. The automatic inflator, which is that dangerous button, goes on the left side. So physically place it on the left side. The other hose has our pressure gauge on it. This is our gas gauge underwater. It tells us how much air we got left. Time. The other gauge right now on this is a depth gauge. Most nowadays we're all using computers, and the computer would go in there. It takes the place of the depth gauge. In fact, the computer takes the place of a lot of other gauges. So we would wear the computer either in the console or on our wrist. Okay? But that goes on the left-hand side. So now you put the round metal seat against the round O-ring. And then tighten the yoke screw down. Don't have to make it real tight, just snug. And once you get it in place, if you don't like the angle of everything, don't move it. Unscrew the yoke screw first, then adjust it if you want to. But tighten the yoke screw down. Okay. Now, what I want to do is easier to hook my automatic inflator up without any air pressure on it. So I'll put 3 fingers on this hose, 2 on the ring. And I'll push the hose ring onto the stem, holding the ring back. The whole hose onto the stem, holding the ring back. Push it on, and then push the ring forward. That locks it. Check it, make sure it's locked. Now, before I turn the air on, what I should do now is inhale on our regulators. If I don't get any air right now, good. That means there's no leaks in the system, in the regulators. No holes in the mouthpiece, or nothing stuck underneath the non-return valve. When we're breathing on this regulator, we're inhaling through this mouthpiece, we're exhaling back in the mouthpiece. The air will then go out of the non-return valve down here where the exhaust T is, which is nothing but a little rubber flapper valve. When you exhale, it opens. When you inhale, it's supposed to shut, but if something's stuck underneath it, sand, piece of seaweed, then you will get water spray while you're diving, which is aggravating, nothing to be panicky about. But check that. Inhale on it. Also check your alternate. You may have to use it, or your buddy may have to use it sometime. So check both of them. But from now on any piece of equipment, before you inhale on it, always exhale. I may think there's nothing in here, but it could be some water, dust. And when I inhale, I could suck it in and choke on it. So before I inhale, always exhale. That maybe will clean everything out. At this point now, I can turn the air on. But one thing is, you should not be looking at the pressure gauge when you turn the air on. We should tell people to turn it around the other way, backwards. But some of the manufacturers put a blowout plug in the back of the gauge, so that the blowout plug will blow out first before the glass will in the front. If there's any defect inside there, that's 3,000 pounds of pressure in here. Okay. But by turning it backwards, now the plug will hit you in the eye. So you should turn it sideways, or don't even look at it at all when you're turning it on. Turn the air on without looking at it. Now, I want to show you what happens with a sticky button. Like I said earlier, I'm going to show you what it looks like. I've got this automatic inflator hose hooked up now. I'm not pushing the button, but I'm going to turn the air on and watch that BC inflate. That's shooting us through the surface. That's the sticky button. What I would do is get this hose up. It lets all the air out of the BC. Reach over with my other hand and unhook that automatic inflator. and that will stop it from happening. Okay. Now, at this point, I would test breathe on the regulator, and now I can watch the pressure gauge. If that pressure gauge is fluctuating very much, that means the tank valve is not all the way on. So test that without, test it by breathing on it and watching the pressure gauge at the same time you're breathing on it. Okay? If the pressure gauge is fluctuating very far, that means the air is not all the way up. Sometimes people get confused, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. They think to turn the air on and actually turn it off and back a little bit. Now at this point, I would then check my automatic inflator, which we know is not working on this one. It's sticking. So if that happens, I've unhooked the hose, and I would go and do everything orally on this BC. Inflate underwater orally or on the surface orally. All right, I've had a good dive. Now when I'm through with everything, I want to turn the air off first before I do anything else. By the way, when this is all assembled, this is what we call a unit, a diving unit. So sometimes we'll tell you, take off your unit or put your unit on. This whole system is what we call a unit, a diving unit. But turn the air off on your diving unit. Now before I can take this yoke screw off of here, unscrew the first stage, I've got to get all the air out of these hoses. The hoses are full of air right now. But rather than sit there and breathe on it 4 or 5 times, all I have to do is push the purge button on this regulator, this button in the front, what we call the purge. Both of them have a purge, so pick either one and push the purge button. That drains all the air out of all the hoses. At this point, I would unhook my automatic inflator if it had been working properly. And now I can undo the yoke screw. Take the first stage off the tank. Now before I put this cover in there, this has been floating around on the water. So I want to get the water out of it. I don't want water to get in that stream. So I'm going to tap the water out or put it up against the tank and blow the water out. Okay? Then put the cover back on the first stage. Tighten the yoke screw down. Take your regulator and put it in your equipment bag or your bundle if you don't have an equipment bag. The bundles will be showing you what to do with. Then I don't want to transport this unit with the BC on it, a tank with the BC on it. So I want to take this off. Unlock the cam buckle, take it out of that first notch, back it back a little bit, then lift it off the tank. And when I'm not watching the tank real close, I should always lay it down. That way it doesn't fall down. Whenever I'm using this buoyancy compensator, I usually will get water in it. So when I'm through with it, I should turn it upside down like this. Hold both wings with one arm. With the other arm, hold the mouthpiece down and drain the water out. One last thing. I talked about buoyancy with our wetsuit, and one of the uses of the BC is to adjust our buoyancy. This is our buoyancy system. The buoyancy compensator, BC, and weights we have to wear. We have to wear weights to overcome the buoyancy of wetsuit, our natural buoyancy, to sink us. The rough rule of thumb is you take 10% of your body weight if you're wearing a full suit in salt water. That's the amount of weight you have to put on to compensate for your buoyancy. So if you weigh 180 pounds, that's 18 pounds. If you're wearing a full wetsuit in salt water. Half a suit, take 1/2 of that. So at 180 pounds, that'd be about 9 or 10 pounds that person should wear. Where do you wear the weights? The old system is the weight belt, which we put around our waist. These are our lead weights. Go on there. A modern approach is the integrated DCs. Here we have weights that are in the buoyancy compensator on each side. We have pockets, some type of system with weights in it, that if you have to, you can pull them to get out of. This is the integrated weight system.